Welcome to the Global Leaders in Diversity and Inclusion Speaker Series. I'm Jill Finlayson. I'm the Director of the Edge and Tech Initiative at UC for expanding diversity and gender equity in tech. I'm here with Ramu Nagapan, Assistant Dean of UC Berkeley Extension. Ramu, would you like to say hello?
Sure, thanks, Jill. Hello, everybody. Good morning. As Jill mentioned, I'm one of the Assistant Deans at University Extension, Berkeley Global, and I'm delighted to be here.
Fantastic. Well, we are very excited today. We're going to be speaking with Leslie Gray, Head of Diversity and Inclusion and Chief of Staff at the Office of the CEO at Mozilla. As we go through, I'm going to give a quick introduction, but as you come up with your questions, please put them in the Q&A and we will address as many of them as we can along the way and at the end. So Leslie, as the head of diversity and inclusion, is responsible for diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy and programming for Mozilla Corporation, and in concert with the Mozilla Foundation. Leslie's DE&I responsibilities are uniquely positioned within Mozilla, reporting to the CEO, Mitchell Baker, and a dotted line reporting structure to Mozilla's Foundation Executive Director. The structure is outside of the HR people function and has consistent and continuous integration within Mozilla leadership and broader business strategies. In addition to leading diversity and inclusion and as Chief of Staff, Leslie also manages business operations for the Office of the CEO and supports strategic projects on behalf of the Office of the CEO. Prior to joining Mozilla, Leslie spent 9 years at Microsoft in various roles, from Director of Infrastructure and Database Management, Xbox division, to the Chief of Staff and for Skype and Yammer organizations. Leslie began her career in business consulting at Accenture, helping companies leverage large consumer data sets, databases, and novel technologies to better align product fit to consumer behavior. As a recovering technologist, Leslie now spends her time helping leaders and organizations drive improved business outcomes, including revenue, usage, retention, employee engagement, and diversity. Leslie is on the Industry Advisory Council for the Virginia State University. She is a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, Rho Delta Omega chapter, a member of the USTA, and a member and volunteer for the Palo Alto Pickleball Association, which is, for those who like me may not be familiar, a very popular combination of ping pong, tennis, and badminton. So need to learn more about that. Leslie earned a Bachelor of Arts in Economics from Northwestern University and a Master of Business Administration from the University of Southern California. An avid tennis and pickleball player, she lives with her furry family member in Silicon Valley, California. So welcome, Leslie. So great to have you with us today.
Thank you, Jill. That was a mouthful.
Well, we're excited to learn more about you. And so, maybe you can start by giving us a little introduction and telling us maybe how your view on DEI differs from the average DEI framework.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, I don't like to necessarily call myself a D&I practitioner, because there are D&I experts that have been in this field and doing the hard work for decades. And I am not that person, but I've certainly been passionate about the efforts and being very supportive of various D&I programming at Microsoft, at Accenture, and then at Mozilla before I was in the head of D&I role. I think what makes me unique, perhaps, or have a unique perspective in this role, and why I was so interested in doing the great work and the good work at Mozilla, is because I've come from that kind of consulting background and had the tech combination. And consulting, as a consultant, you get comfortable with ambiguity and innovation. As consultants, you tend to go into organizations because there's an early problem that they want to solve. And the problem doesn't necessarily mean it have to be static. It could be environmental. It could be a change in the marketplace. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a static kind of problem. But you're used to assessing the market, understanding where there may be leading practices and best practices, and then also looking at the organization, looking at their strategy, helping to design and change their strategy, helping to look at where innovation and technology may be out there in the marketplace that could give step level change to an organization. And then typically you're employing change. So you're making people really uncomfortable. You're changing how they work. You're changing what the tools they work with. You're changing how they deliver to the marketplace. And so having spent over 10 years doing that, I'm very comfortable with ambiguity. I'm very comfortable with doing lots of assessments. I'm very comfortable with change. And I'm very comfortable with, unfortunately, making people uncomfortable. So I think that combination and that mindset, if applied to D&I thought it could be really different and interesting. And I could look at D&I perhaps with a different lens than someone who has who's been in the industry for some time as a practitioner.
So why do you think we haven't seen as much progress? Programs exist, they have goals, they're trying to solve a real problem. Why do you think we haven't been so successful moving the dial?
Yeah, that's a great question. D&I practitioners, I think I want to start with, there are people out there that have been working hard on this, and they have moved the needle. But I think we will all say, and maybe most of us would agree, is that we just haven't moved it as much as we wanted right. to. And so, your question is, what's been the holdup? And it's hard to get people to change. We see in our society, and I'm talking mostly about the US, but it isn't just central to the US. We see that there's years, centuries of, anti-Black racism, anti-brown racism that spans across, the globe. We see stigma associated with people who may look at the world differently, who may experience things differently. And those people persist and exist, and they also have jobs. They are in the companies in which we work for. And so there's a lot of resistance to even the facts, to the facts and the history, not just in this, like I said, in this country, but more globally, and recognition of that. And then hence the ability to change. The other thing that I would kind of add to this point is that you have people who are proponents of change, who are proponents of wanting to have a more equitable, work environment and work culture. And yet, when the change gets very close to their behavior, the adjacency, the nearness of it, then it's like, well, wait a minute, that's not me. Why do I have to change? And so one example I'd like to provide is more recent. As we were talking to some folks who are very much supporters in the for D&I, and we talked about kind of interviewing in and what interviewing in really looks like. And we had a set of questions that you might choose from, 8 questions that you might choose from on interviewing in. And it really, and the people, a couple of folks says, well, if you were to ask these questions today, we would fail, and we're good employees. Like, you wouldn't get people like us. And my first response was like, well, yes, that's true. But, we've been asking in engineering people, how long does it take for the car to get to the bottom of the street if it weighs such and such and the wind is blah, 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 and I'm not quite clear how helpful that is in people being able to code. So we've been known to ask some questions during the interview process that you can't attribute someone's ability to perform and do the work. And this one is really a question about, can they add value to our culture and to our work products? And yet, we potentially don't want to ask those type of questions. And so my response also is, well, when we start asking, guess what? People will start thinking about an answer, because people were willing to think about an answer about how long it takes that car to get to the bottom of the street. So, all of a sudden, everyone will start preparing. Everyone will get out there and actually think about how they bring their lived experiences to the products that they develop. And that is super enhancing. So I kind of going back to the question is, why haven't we seen the amount of change that we would like to see? Is that the closer it gets and encroaches on people's current behavior, the more difficult it is. And so, whereas in the space of DEI, we've made a lot of change and had a lot of impact. Now we're getting to the impact, that the change that comes closer to people's, kind of habitual behavior. And I think that's even more going to be more challenging.
And I really like what you said there about asking better questions in the interview, asking, how are you going to enhance and build and expand our culture and ideas and our innovation? So I really think that that's another challenge, right? It's changing the way things have been done, the questions that have been asked, and really looking and questioning, like, why was this in the job description, or why was this an interview question? Aren't there better questions we could ask?
Mm-hmm. And we're learning. Like this is the space is evolving significantly, and we're learning. So a lot of times, let's try this question out and see if that one works, and then I'll tweak it a little bit more on the next person and on the next person. So everything is, we're still learning. It's a journey.
Awesome. Please share.
So thanks for that, Leslie. And this idea of interviewing in it's kind of a good segue to something I'm wondering about too. So BIPOC and women are under-included in tech. So what do you say to people who say the candidates, those people just aren't there? And what should we be focusing on instead of the pipeline? What should companies be doing to address this issue?
Great question. It's one that gets me fired up, it starts to boil my blood. And so, I'd start with, we have been recycling talent in the tech industry. So it's, and you have your feeder organizations. Having worked for Accenture is a feeder organization, or has seen in some companies as a feeder organization. They get folks out of college, they train them, they work for 2 to 5 years in consulting, and then they go off. And people, you'll see in many job descriptions prior consulting experience, right? And that means that you've consulted at usually one of these large consulting firms. And so there is this, well, if Accenture doesn't choose me, then now I'm no longer in the system. I'm not in the pipeline, and now I can't get to the next job that requires consulting experience, and so forth and so on. And so through those type of requirements that we've built in historically in tech into our job descriptions, we've interviewed out, or we've eliminated diverse candidates that have been, Accenture does a great job, and I'm not picking on Accenture, of getting diversity, but if their diversity is only 5%, then what makes us think ever when you get down into the pipeline that you're going to see 10 and 15%, because we've now eliminated really good talent from that kind of pipeline of candidates. So where I think about, how do we think about this differently, is that the talent is out there. People are out there. They want to work. They have great experience to bring to the table. And they were, they may not have had that, we'll call it kind of traditional career path, if you will. And I also want to just bring up that in the United States, college is expensive. And so it's not affordable. And so to take many great, talented, smart individuals are sometimes unable to get into the system of the collegiate system because it just prices them out. And it continues to do that. And I'm, no offense to Berkeley here, it's a great institution, but we also, just recognizing that is also can be a challenge, that we are by default potentially eliminating folks that, just from a economic perspective. And so that said, I think there's an opportunity when we talk about the talent pool, is to talk about what experience do we want that we value. And so instead of having worked at prior consulting firms, what I love to see is that you're comfortable with ambiguity, that you are used to, you can assess the marketplace. You have tricks or ways and methodologies of how to assess the marketplace or competitors. And that's what you want. And that's usually some of the things that you think of as a quote unquote good consultant. Those are things that they're good at doing, and they've done for a long time. They have frameworks. They're able to do everything in a 2x2. We are the best at 2x2s. We can put together a slide presentation like no one else. So just ask explicitly for that if that's what you're looking for. And then you'll get a variety of amazing talent into your pipeline.
I love that. That's a great example of, like, here's what we want to get to. Here's the result. How can you get there? What experience do you have that will help us get there? It's that sort of leveling up and saying, here's our goal. this is what we want to achieve. Here's how some examples of how we've achieved it in the past, but maybe you have a different way of achieving that.
Exactly. It really just opens up the pool, and now you start to get smart people that bring a different viewpoint, and together it's super powerful. It's just super powerful for an organization.
Talking about different viewpoints, what does leadership commitment look like? And when you talk to leaders about these important topics, what do they typically say, and where is there opportunities for improvement?
Yeah. I think when we think about leadership and support for DNI, it has been a bit of arm's length away. It means, a great leader, right? Leadership support kind of looks like money and resources, people, time, commitment of prioritization. That's kind of what generally I think we think about when we think about leadership support. And if you have a leader that does those things, you're like, whoa, holy guacamole, I'm in the right place. I'd like to extend that and say, when a person who is leading a company or leading a division in a company, if there is a change in the marketplace, make up any change in the marketplace, we can take, automobile. I spent a good bit of my early years. I'm from Detroit, so I spent a good bit of my early years thinking about automotive in Detroit. And so when you had, say, it was in the 80s, when you had lower fuel usage vehicles that came into the marketplace, and for the Ford and GMs, which were kind of the gas guzzlers back in the 70s and 80s, that really changed. And you could look at that as a leader and say, well, how do we compete, right? And leaders studied. How many books were there about, what Toyota and some of the other Japanese automakers did amazingly well, how they were able to be more lean in their production facilities and things of that sort, how they innovated on weight and all of those other great things. And so leaders within automotive companies, they studied what these other companies were doing because it was integral to their success. That is what I think is an opportunities for leaders. I find when I talk to leaders and I say, well, tell me about, people that you follow. How do you stay current on what's going on and the different viewpoints, how people really feel in communities about various topics or various things that are happening current place. It's hard to wait for something to be published and let that publish, which is really, that's really curated content that's important. But if you wait for that curation, you've missed some of the thinking of people who are out on the, that are on the ground, actually in the movements, in these various movements. And so, my question to leaders is like, what are you doing in that space to stay current? And I get a lot of, well, actually, I don't have time, or, I have to be honest, I don't use social media a lot, or, ... And so I think that time commitment to be in these communities, kind of listening, and you can do it, under any kind of ID. No one has to know you're CEO of X company. You can have all kind of identities, right? So to have an identity or to get a report. We just had Juneteenth in the US written into as a national holiday here in the US. There was a lot of conversation in the Black community around kind of feelings around this. And so as a company, if you're thinking about, well, how do we want to celebrate it, or how do we want to think about Juneteenth? If you then kind of got on the bandwagon, well, the US is celebrating, so now we're giving everybody the day off and we're going to do it this year. We don't have to wait till next year. There would have been a little bit of flack within your organization from Black and brown people to say, well, wait a minute, what we really want is X, and what you gave us was a holiday. And while we are appreciative of the holiday, and it's maybe some folks will say it should have always been a holiday, what we really would be appreciative of is pay equity and career velocity. And we'd love to know what you're doing in that space. And so I feel like as a leader, you could come across as being tone deaf if you're not kind of following some of this and kind of staying current. So the commitment of a leader's time to doing the good work, to learning and being current in this space, to me, that's a differentiator for a leader.
Yeah, I I think what you said there is, not outsourcing the listening tour, not making assumptions about what people want, but having those conversations and, taking it upon yourself. I think, the idea of just looking at your own network, right? Who's in your network? If your network isn't diverse, you've got some work to do there as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. The one thing I'm all about network, as who your network and who's in your community, because people, people can be in your network, but cannot be your friends, if you will, and meaning that they don't feel comfortable having conversations and telling you about what may really be going on and how they think about things that may impact their experience in the world. And so to get to a place where people feel and trust in you to have that, those are really authentic relationships. And so, yes, that's great. And plus a gazillion on that. I love, kind of diversifying my friend network. That said, is your friends are not meant to educate you. That is not their duty, to be, I love when people say, well, I've got a Black friend, or I've got an Asian friend, and that Asian friend told me, well, that's one person. And so let's not call that one person a full representative of the diaspora of whatever they group they sit into. That would be unfair to them and unfair to you. That doesn't negate that you should have more than one. You should definitely have a handful if you can, for sure. But don't necessarily put the responsibility on that individual, because it doesn't look very much like a relationship and a friendship. It looks more like that you're using them. And so doing the good work outside of your relationships and then using that to augment is a very positive thing.
Thank you.
So there's another question we've asked all the speakers in this series, and always yields some fascinating insights. So what's Mozilla's approach, and what's your mandate in this role?
Yeah. So the way I think about things in any role, what's the chief of staff experience for me is I've been a chief of staff where I wanted to keep the office of the chief of staff, the office of the CEO, very small, very nimble, very small, very agile. I also don't necessarily love the idea of building fiefdoms, as we say, or building large teams. Large teams are needed, but not in this particular function, in my opinion. I know that's not everyone's opinion. And so with that, sometimes I need to take things into the office of the CEO as the chief of staff, work on them, and then I like to place them back in their rightful place. So I love to put things back in the org. And by doing that, I build a relationship with leaders to say, hey, I'm going to help do this, and then I'm sending it back to you. And so I'm always building something in a way that makes it sustainable for the leader to own it, manage it, et cetera. And so it becomes a help to them and not a hindrance. I bring that up because I believe in building sustainable business processes. And so when I looked at diversity and inclusion for Mozilla and kind of where I could add value, one area was building a sustainable DE&I practice and program and central programming for Mozilla Corporation and the foundation, and making it one that could live with as the size of the organization maybe kind of varies a little bit. But we're never going to be the size of a Microsoft or a Google or Facebook. I mean, well, maybe one day, I don't know, but I don't see that in the near term. We're, multitudes smaller than those companies. And so I really thought about what's the right size of this? How do we have impact, and how do we build this so it can run, so that the resourcing that you add into this function gets you more stuff, more amazing work, not just repeating the same work because the engine, every time it's very manual. And so I've looked at, how do we make this sustainable? And that really is part of my charter. I really looked at an 18-month window of time to say, how do I get this so it's really revving and running? And regardless of who's in the role, that they have a capability, and they can then add more to it, and can continue to have the foundational capabilities. The other thing that was super important to me in this role, and part of my charter, is building up that kind of foundation. And so we've had amazing practitioners at Mozilla, D&I practitioners at Mozilla, and they, have really helped with we've had really good focus on gender diversification within the organization, as well as support for the quilt bag community as well. We didn't have as much, I think, programming around BIPOC communities, as much as I would like to see. Maybe I'm biased, so I'll put that out there. So we didn't have enough there, and it kind of ebbed and flowed. Every leader could bring their own kind of focus. And so my other thing I wanted to do, and part of my charter, was to build up the foundational infrastructure needed to do kind of good D&I as part of the kind of 18 months. So I had those two charters that I was really focused on, or am focused on. I'm not done yet.
Yeah, thank you.
I love the fact that you're almost taking your consulting experience and you're kind of consulting with the different business units, but you're not taking ownership. It's like, no, this is your job. You're accountable. I'll consult with you and give you some advice, but you've got to meet the objective. So that's pretty clever.
Oh, now you found my secret, Jill. It's not about doing all the work yourself. It's about sharing in the work. I'm very collaborative. That's a pillar.
Absolutely. Maybe you can share what are some of the wins or the programs that you're most proud of?
Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. Our team is small. A team was even smaller. So at one point in time, we had not even a full-time resource dedicated to D&I. It's in some ways you go, oh my goodness, that's horrible. But what was great about it is, like I said, I'm very much a collaborator. The culture of Mozilla is one of people wanting to do good, people wanting to do good for society and for a greater purpose, because we are a mission-driven organization. And so as we saw the racial unrest in the US, we saw members of our organization saying, what can I do? How can I help? And no one should ever ask me how they can help. I've got a list of things that need help. And so we started a racial justice ally action group. It's a mouthful. We started a lot of programs. That was one, but several programs where people could do the work, that they could help. They could help us being the broader organization, think about a variety of things as it relates to race, gender, sexual orientation, and what was needed in those communities, and how we could show up for those communities, and how we can make Mozilla a more inclusive environment. And I say that all to say, what I'm most proud of are the people doing the work. Because sometimes I think as D&I practitioners, you feel like you're the one, you're doing it. And it is by your brute force as to how much gets done. And sometimes you feel like you're on an island, you're doing the good work and you're just like reading, like the waves are knocking you over, and that there's no one there to help you. And so there was some goodness in not having our D&I team fully built out, if you will, resourced. Because people in the organization says, well, wait, I can step in, I can do that. This is part of my job. I own the inclusive culture that we want to have at Mozilla. I am a participant in that. And I don't know anything about this space. So many people say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I said, well, that's great. Me either. So we can do it. We can learn it together. We can ask folks. We can see what they think. And so it became all of us, and not just me, or not just a small team of people. And so that is what I'm most proud of. And so I'll say kind of what programs I continue to this day, like we're going to be launching Inclusion Champions. And so our goal with that program is to build an ally network within the organization. So we have people that are modeling inclusive behavior in all meetings. So, so the experiences that people have, the microaggressions or the regular aggressions that people have, it happens in these one-off scenarios. And as a D&I person, you can't be in all those meetings, right? You don't know what's happening. As a leader, you're not in all those meetings. Our executive team is not in all those meetings. So to have those allies out there and modeling that behavior, will then kind of make sure that everyone kind of has that felt experience of being included. And so our Inclusion Champion program will include some extensive training and skill development. So how to be an ally, how to show up as an ally, how to help correct behavior with different methodologies in a way that is inclusive. So we don't want to alienate people because they make a mistake. We all are going to make a mistake. We're on this learning journey. And so they'll have that kind of training, and then they get to practice it, because skill development is not just having the training, but it's using the training and reusing the training. And so we give them ways to actually practice and apply those learnings. And we give them ways to do it in a way that they can show up. Because not everyone shows up in the same way. Not everyone wants to speak in front of a gazillion people. Not everyone, can be an ally in that way. And so we recognize that allies show up a different way. And so I'm really excited about that program. And we also have DEI councils within each business group. So once again, it's like the DEI organization is small, but the power of us is the power in our community within Mozilla and the Mozillians that are out there doing the good work. And the more people that we can train that are actually owning the culture, we'll get the culture that we want. We'll really see the change behavior. So that a couple examples of programs and things that we're doing, but more importantly, it's the humans behind the work.
So that kind of talks about what's happening inside the company. How are you sharing maybe those best practices or data outside of the company?
Oh, Jill, you were doing so good. You were making me feel good about myself, and then you brought this question up. So all of us have our strengths, and all of us probably have some things that we're not so good at. I'm not so good at talking about the work that we do. And so, when you're not good at something, you hire someone to help you. So I'm looking at, I've brought on some great talent to kind of help where I'm not so strong, and make sure we talk about it, the work that we're doing, and more not because we're patting ourselves on the back, because we are like on this learning journey, let me be honest. But because our learning journey can be somebody else's learning journey too. And so we publish on our Mozilla blog, Life at Mozilla blog, or our Mozilla.com kind of blog. So we'll publish kind of how we're doing or what we think. Of course, we'll have our D&I disclosure, but everybody does. And that's a lot of stuff to weed through. I mean, it's important. But if you don't have 5 hours to spend on it in one sitting, probably our blogs are a better thing. The other thing is as we do things, we kind of post. So we kind of shared what we did for Women's History Month and what our goal was for there. So we'll kind of share as we go along the way of what we've done, and give other people ideas. The other thing is I'm never too smart to steal someone else's great idea and give them full credit for it. So borrow it, if you will. But I talk to other D&I practitioners. What are you doing about this? Or, I'll get great ideas. And like, well, we did this. I'm like, that sounds fantastic. Let me try it. So I love the sharing amongst D&I practitioners as too. I'm happy to reach out to folks and hear what they're doing and how it was perceived, and seeing then how could we do something like that? Is that a good thing for Mozilla and where Mozilla is?
Thanks.
All right. So Leslie, you touched on making change happen in an organization. So I'm wondering, what do you do when you encounter resistance, when you're trying to push change, or people who are just simply tired of change? How do you respond to that? Yeah.
I don't know how much everyone on this call has kind of been following. I like the term, the Great Resignation, that's happening right now in the marketplace, particularly also, quite so in tech, and it was a perfect storm, if you will. People coming out of the pandemic, having a lot of time to reflect, figuring out what really makes them happy, where they can take their career, fatigue. People have been homeschooling their young ones, and trying to work full jobs, and having a house full of people, and your family, your loved ones. I mean, you love them until you're with them 24 hours a day. So it's been a lot. It's been a lot on folks, and so we are seeing. When I say we, I mean the industry here, are seeing a lot of resignations and people kind of finding roles and jobs that are, inspiring for them. And so I guess I bring that up a little bit from the perspective of we see fatigue in the organization. And Leslie going in and saying, well, can you all just do these 5 other things in addition to the gazillion things that you're already doing? We see fatigue because people are fatigued. We see fatigue because our organizations are understaffed. When you have voluntary churn at the rate that we're seeing in the marketplace right now, you have a good percent either positions unfilled or positions that have people who are new to the organization. So their productivity, is challenged within teams. And so a lot of times what I do is, first, when it kind of responding to fatigue, is figure out like, what do you already have to do and how can I make what you do easier and better? Is my first response. So we're doing a lot of hiring. Other companies are doing a lot of hiring because because everybody's changing. So how can we how can we give people some tools that they can use to bring on amazing talent and think about kind of value add to their organization? So we've looked at that. How can we help them? Do you want us to prove things? Can we help you with, prepping you and your interview panelists on how to think about interviews? We've looked at different interview approaches as well. Can we go to panel interviews instead of doing 5 individual interviews? Can we do like interview days? So we're looking at kind of how do we save time and do the good work. So that kind of helps with fatigue. And I love that because it's innovative. Like we're addressing an immediate need, and we get a chance to pilot a lot of things really quickly, and we learn and we adapt. When it comes to resistance, people at least are not so open about being resistant to doing the work. It's not like, well, no, of course we shouldn't hire people of color. You don't get that kind of resistance. It shows itself in, well, that's hard, or, well, how could we do that if that's not what's happening in the marketplace? So you're asking us to do more than what's in the marketplace. So you get other kind of resistance. And so I like that kind of resistance. We're like, well, let's have that conversation. Well, why do you think that? Well, there's only 2% Black people in marketing. Really? Where'd you get that data point from? And because there's only 2%, why can't we get 3 then? Why can't we be more appealing to that workforce? Why are there not many people, of color? So a lot of times, A, the data is not there. And so it's an opinion more than it is a fact. B, let's push beyond that. It gives us an opportunity to have a really great conversation with folks and kind of break down those barriers. And that kind of takes me to the point of, I've been talking about this learning journey, say that fast 10 times. It gives us an opportunity to have a conversation with individuals, and human to human. It doesn't scale, of course, when you have hundreds of thousands of employees and individuals. But if you can have these really deep conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging with individuals, they become allies, right? And they then can have that conversation with another person and so forth and so on. And so the power of that opportunity is not lost on me, and I value that. So I don't love resistance for resistance sakes, but I love it for, giving a pathway to a conversation that really needs to be had. And also I learned something, like, you say, oh, okay, well, you were okay with this, but not okay with that. But why is that? And then people go, well, I hadn't thought about it that way. Okay, well, good. Let's think about this differently. And even for me to think about it differently, because I too am on this learning journey.
How do you deal with folks who might say things like, well, why are you offering this special program for women? Or why are you offering this training for people of color? What is your reaction to those kind of questions?
Yeah. Generally speaking, I want to invest in humans being amazing. And so I want all people to be amazing, and I want them all to have the same opportunities, but we didn't all start from the same opportunities. And society and the work cultures that we're in presents us with different problems. So if we can invest in our workforce in a way that they need, the way that can help them be amazing and help us produce amazing products and represent the customers, the people that in the world that we want to use our products, then we've done great. We've done great. And so I don't look at it as, oh, I'm only investing in women or only investing in people of color. I'm like, well, I want to invest in all of y'all because I want you to be amazing. And I don't want to have a job in DE&I. I want it to be like natural. And so we don't need any D&I practitioners. I mean, that's the creme de la creme. So, you know, we look at providing the right resources to help the individuals, to help them kind of be their best amazing self at work. And that may differ because of the intersections of their identity. It's not the same for everyone. And so we don't offer the same thing for everyone, but we want to make sure we're investing in all of our talent.
Yeah, one of the things that I've been observing with the COVID and pandemic and recovery is that this opportunity to better serve everyone, right? To readjust how we're doing things. And one of those is, of course, flexibility, right? Whether you can work remotely or not. And some of the data shows that women, people of color really appreciate being able to work from home, having that flexibility. But if you couple that with the perhaps unintended consequences of saying, well, if you come to the office 3 days a week, you get an office. If you come less than 3 days a week, you don't get an office. And suddenly now the women who wanted the flexibility are not getting an office. How do we think about these issues in terms of leveling the playing field, but also making some intentional choices, especially at this really critical pivot point?
Mm-hmm. So I think when I've delved in a little bit deeper on and anecdotally, not like running a survey on why are perhaps women and people of color more interested in working from home, it's because they don't have those aggressions. You're like, wow, isn't it lovely that I don't have to experience this aggression? No one's going to ask me what your hair doing today, or no one's going to say your skirt is this, or, you know, if you need to, because women do still carry a good bit of the burden, I won't call it the burden, the workload, if you will, from the home, that flexibility to kind of, if you have to run and do something, you can do that and still be like engaged and productive at work. So I just want to acknowledge that maybe if the office is the way, and I'm not sure I'm convinced on that, but if there's some value in kind of people working together in proximity, and you want to make sure that your entire workforce is interested in that, then we need to make sure that we give them environment to want to come to, right? And they can still have those levels of flexibility. And so we make that kind of open and known in the workforce. So I do think there's some goodness in how you think about your culture and understanding what's motivating people to want to work. Now, mind you, I want to work remote too. So I'm not, and it doesn't have to do with aggressions, but other things. But just kind of digging in a little bit deeper there, I think can help you identify additional opportunities for improvement. On your perspective of, kind of equity and equitable work environments. I don't know if I have a strong kind of opinion per se on that specific example that you gave, because I think a lot of people, a lot of organizations right now are thinking about like this, what does office look like and what does it mean, and how do we have kind of just-in-time locations that provide the same level of support in office for everyone. And so I think companies are really doing some innovative things there that I'm interested to kind of see how that falls out. The other thing that's quite interesting about that is a lot of times when they do want to have these kind of in-office days, it's because they want those to be very collaborative days. So assuming we can collaborate in person safely, together soon en masse, then I think that people may not necessarily want to come into the office to sit in an office. They want to come in the office because they're doing working sessions. And so you really want to have more collaborative workspace than you do office space anyway. And so I think it's filling the needs of what people need in order to do good work. If we focus on how they can do productive, high quality work, then I think we'll end with solutions that are equitable for the type of work that we do.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's an exciting time to reevaluate a lot of the assumptions.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the days where it was everyone had an office, and then I remember the days everyone had a cubicle. This is how I'm dating myself. And then I remember to us doing open, open work environments. And so I felt like I was in a fishbowl, I don't know, in the middle of a building and everybody walking by. And then, then you started to hear, well, different people have different work styles and learning abilities and ability, their level to focus. And so then we moved back into partial offices. And so I've just kind of seen this whole thing go. And so now it's even, interesting where many companies still had open collaborative space. And now with COVID are saying, well, we need to make some more office spaces so people, who need to kind of be away from their home to work can have a safe space, safe being like less germy space to work. So it is super interesting and fascinating.
So Leslie, a little while ago, you talked about fatigue and sort of how that impacts an organization. But for you yourself, how do you keep up your energy and drive through all of this? And you wear a couple different hats and you're, fighting the good fight day after day.
Oh yeah. Well, I do believe in work-life balance. And I don't know if everyone would call my life currently balanced, but it works for me. So I think work-life balance is really individual. I do work probably long hours. I mean, I don't know if I keep track of it that closely, but my computer's on a lot. And I think when you work from home, a lot of people have had this in the pandemic, your computer is not too far. My computer is not too far from the kitchen and from my bedroom. It's a bad combination, eat, sleep, work in the pandemic. So having hobbies has really helped. At least I have commitments with people that I play tennis with and play pickleball with, as we mentioned early on. And so that just gives me something to kind of look forward to. And so that works for me. And I have to admit, I love the work that I do. If I didn't love the work, I remember people saying this, I'm like, yeah, right. But if I didn't love the work that I was doing, I wouldn't necessarily do it because I wouldn't be motivated to get up in the morning and actually sit through Zoom. Did we talk about Zoom fatigue yet? But I wouldn't sit through Zoom fatigue if it just wasn't really good meetings and good people. I enjoy talking to people. I mean, I know I seem like a chatty patty, but I'm actually borderline introvert extrovert, just so we're clear. I know I'm a chatty patty today, but I enjoy talking to the people that I work with at work, and I hear about their life, and we do work. And in some ways, it's been kind of great for me because my pandemic household was really small. The other human in my household is very much an introvert. So they're probably happy that I have a lot of Zoom meetings and can talk to other humans. And so I did feel like a connection versus that kind of early isolation. But this is not about me. About folks on here is I do understand people having boundaries and trying to figure out kind of how they can be most productive at work and be there for their family and for themselves. But if you can have whatever your hobby is, if you can kind of give yourself some space for your hobby, I think it just energizes you. And also, make sure that I spend more time doing the work that I love and less time doing the work that I don't love, and finding someone who loves it and letting them do it. So if something's not my strength, as we mentioned, Jill, like communication of what we're doing, find someone who loves doing that and be best friends with them. They're my new best friend. And I'll do something that I love doing for them and let them do something that they love doing for me. And it works out. So I spend a good bit of my day doing things that I enjoy doing at work. And I think that helps a lot.
So given and perhaps despite the events of the past year, we had George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, Asian hate, COVID, Me Too challenges still persistent. What are you optimistic about despite all of that going on?
Yes. On the one hand, you go, wow, there's so many people who we've lost, even through COVID and through the pandemic. So many amazing lives lost. So many people being mistreated in the world that just really shouldn't have to. Like, we just shouldn't have to. People shouldn't have to live like that. And it's extremely sad and it's sobering. And so, on the optimistic side is people. It's felt deeply for a lot of people, and that has caused a lot of people to take action, to look, even if the action is something so small. I hear people saying, well, I talked to my spouse about such and such, and I was like, oh, wow, okay, we're having these conversations at the dinner table. This is not just happening at work. And people are, there's a level of awareness, like, I didn't realize that was happening. I'm like, what? It's been like out in the open. I can't believe you didn't know it was happening. But people didn't know. It wasn't impacting their day-to-day lives. It wasn't something that was in proximity to them. And so it was like, well, that wouldn't happen here. And it was happening everywhere, and it was being filmed everywhere. And they now realized how problematic it was. And so that awakening of the conscious for allies or future allies is what I'm optimistic about. I'm optimistic, for our young people. They have exposure to so much good information and maybe not so good information, and then good conversations and activism. And I'd love to see a change in my lifetime. I'd love to be part of that change, of course, but I'd love to see that change continue. And so I'm optimistic, I guess cautiously optimistic, about the allyship, and the conversations and the awareness, and the journey that folks are on, beyond, people who have been historically marginalized and oppressed.
I like your point there about it extending now beyond the workplace, beyond the media, to having these personal, person-to-person conversations as well.
Yes, people have found things out about their spouses that they never knew. Or so I hear. It's a rumor. It's not true.
All right, so we're going to go to the questions from our audience now. And those of you who are listening, we do have time for your questions, so feel free to pop them into the Q&A box. So our first question that we received a little while ago was from Camelia. And Leslie, I think you've already answered this question, but you're welcome to add any more detail if you'd like. And I might reframe the question a little bit too, but the question is, how do you handle resistance to diversity in your organization? And I think you said there's not really sort of explicit outward resistance, but it comes in other forms. So you're welcome to talk about that some more. But I think the other question that's interesting, that's come up in some of our conversations is, what are you measuring when it comes to diversity? And are there metrics that are important, or is that the wrong question to be asking altogether?
Okay. Let me add a little bit more on kind of resistance to diversity. The other way that it kind of shows itself, if you will, is in culture. In culture, in like the culture, we have the dominant culture and the dominant culture norms. And so that becomes the norms. And so instead of it being, oh, well, we don't want X kind of people in the org, it's, well, you'll hear, well, this is how we handle these kind of things. And I'm like, well, who is we? Who's the we here? Who are we talking about? And well, we generally do X. Well, why do we generally do X? And so this is, of course, from my consulting background, we always question like the why. So sometimes it's kind of questioning that why. That's important, that we can then have some conversations. But there's a couple of things I just want to explicitly say on as kind of resistance. People who have historically been marginalized in the workforce are continuing to see that, and it just reinvents itself with different language. And so catching that language is what's really important, and questioning that language is important. So, women of color, women in general, we're still seeing that, well, you were just too aggressive, or how you said that, and blah, blah, blah. If you want a diverse organization, then you have to understand that communication styles differ, styles of how, their styles of work differ. And it doesn't mean that one or the other is wrong or right. It's just different. And so it was interesting where I had an African-American woman having a conversation with a woman of Chinese descent, and very much different cultures, their individual experiences and cultures and how they showed up at work were just at the opposite ends of the spectrum. And that conversation didn't go well. And so, but I said, well, wait a minute. Actually, I think the conversation was fine. You just didn't like how it was delivered because it's not culturally, it's not consistent with what you like, how you receive information. And so I think, when we think about organizations and diversification, we need to let people know, like, just because I said it in a way that's comfortable for me, that doesn't mean that I'm being offensive to you, that I need you to accept me and how I deliver information, just like I absolutely want to accept and understand how you deliver communication to me. So I don't want your way to be right, and I don't want my way to be right. I just want us to accept that we have different methods. And I think the experience that we had is that when an individual of power has a certain level of norms, then they want everyone to comply to their norms to be accepted. And we really need leadership to think like, well, there's different ways to present that. And that the presentation wasn't disrespectful, it was just different. And so understanding those norms. So I do think when you think about resistance to diversity, a lot of times that shows up in these kind of the cultural norms of, well, that person was aggressive, or how they gave that feedback was, it wasn't really helpful, or all they do is complain. I hear those. I don't hear those things necessarily in my org, but I hear that from other organizations and people working in other organizations. You're like, oh, okay, they're too hard on us. You're like, oh, okay, here we go. So these are just other words and other framing for resistance. And we hear them enough that I think as folks in D&I that you go, okay, well, let's break this down. The other example I just want to give there is I've kind of been in some recent training around executive presence. And I've been, appalled, talking about my, my blood boiling, if you will, about this kind of this stereotype of, that executive presence is kind of demonstrating cis white male behavior. And I was like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to show up like that. It's not authentic for me. And also it's not helpful, so helpful to the organization. So I do think like we as leaders in corporate culture have to think about culture differently. Let me just quickly address this kind of how do we measure? I've heard from others to say, like, how do you know you're doing the right things? It's when people who have been historically marginalized feel that they can show up to work and they can do their best work. And that usually is some measure, and it can be somewhat subjective. And I know that that's not always a great answer. Of course, we're always looking at representation because, you still need to have people in the workforce that look like the communities that you're serving and the people that you're serving. So representation does matter. And it's helpful, and it helps people feel comfortable to know that there's others like them. And so we don't want to, and representation is not just on race and ethnicity and on gender and gender representation, but also on age. I know there was something around age. It's also on if you've got a global organization, representation across the various geographies and so forth. So it is really quite extensive representation that you'd love to get to.
Let's go ahead and go to Inhoa Marquez, who asks, in your current position, how are you addressing ageism when building a diverse environment?
Yeah, interestingly enough, like Mozilla is pretty diverse when it comes to age, which is different. Like if I were thinking back to my Accenture days, I told you Accenture has been kind of a bit of Leslie's version of Accenture. It's been a feeder organization. It's a little bit, it has historically been on the consulting side, a little bit of burnout. So you bring people in young, you work them really hard, and then you put them out into the world. And so I would imagine that as an example, I don't know this as a fact, but they may have an organization that has, more younger folks, if you will, in their organization, and less people maybe in their 40s and 50s and 60s. But Mozilla is not that way. Mozilla it's not perfect, but Mozilla, that one has not been the biggest challenge that we have, which is great. I have my gray hair to prove it. The one thing on ageism that I love, and I've heard kind of about reverse mentoring. I don't know if I necessarily love that term, but I do. I think it's so powerful when we're connecting people across generational norms and understanding, because our customer base, right? If we only have people that are my age, at some point we're not going to have any customers, So we want to constantly understand how younger folks and how older folks, how they're accepting of our products and what does and doesn't work for them. And so having those folks within our organization is hugely important. And where we may not connect early enough with younger folks because they're not of working age, right? We use our outreach programs with historically Black colleges and universities. Like we had a program with Hampton this past semester, and we had students building something for our Firefox product. And we asked them, like, the question for them was build something that is useful for you. What would you use? What would be helpful for you? It was also about ethical computing and how to build that ethically, right? And so it was really interesting as to what was important to them, because I was like, well, that wouldn't help me. But that's okay that they weren't building for me. And so that's a way for us to connect, not because we want that talent necessarily coming into Mozilla, but we just want that talent out in the workforce. And we want to hear from different people about kind of how they think about and what's helpful for them. So we address it that way as well. Community out.
Thinking about ageism from the flip side, and especially looking globally, millennials and Gen Z are becoming a much larger portion of the workforce. They often get a bad rap of being entitled or impatient. Why do you think they have that reputation, and how do we dispel maybe some of the myths around that?
Yeah, well, they grew up in a different, they grew up with different things. Media was different for them. Technology was different for them. And so, I mean, I too may be a little impatient, because I'm used to things coming a little bit faster, and so there may be some goodness in that, but also that's very positive. Like that impatience and desire for change are like, they're like, why are we still talking about slavery? Well, there's a good reason why we're still talking about slavery, but I get your thing, like, can we move past that? Well, what does moving past that look like? And having that sense of urgency culturally for us to move past it. So that's some good energy that you want to also, I think, instead of saying, we want to actually have that come forward and pointed in the direction of where we have needs. And so there's value in that. I think it's also value in kind of partnering for those generations to have a relationship with people who may have done it and say, well, here's the challenges that we ran into. I like to always say, this is the method to the madness. This is why we did that. And this was the scenario, the requirements, the restrictions, the risk, et cetera. Giving them that context so that they can then solution for us in a way that maybe we wouldn't think of. So I think it's super powerful to have that balance and those relationships across the generations, because it's that combination that's really powerful. Like, I'd like you not to touch the stove when it's hot because I told you that it's hot, and you trusted me, not because you got to go touch it and have the same experience we did, a couple hundred years ago. So if we can kind of reduce those obstacles for them, then we can also empower them to move us faster, and change and where we want, and the momentum that we want to have organizationally.
Thanks.
All right, so we've got one last question that we'll end here with. So Leslie, what advice do you have for someone seeking a DEI role in an organization, and what questions should you be asking the company if you're a candidate?
Oh, great question. When I thought about kind of the DE&I role and why this role was interesting for me, and so that's what I'll share here is one, it was leadership. I felt that the leadership at Mozilla, if there was a group that could change, that could lead an organization through a cultural change, and that were supportive of their time, of their dollars, of their resources to diversity and inclusion, like this was a group that I thought could do it. And so there's something about like riding the tail of a winning team. And so I know that's a bit unfair. Some people love a challenge, and I do love a challenge, but that wasn't the challenge that I wanted. And so having a leadership group that was supportive and engaging was, I think, is something I'd look for. Second thing that I look for is autonomy. Like you hire great people to do great work. You don't hire great people to micromanage them. And so, I want a leadership team that can trust in the work of me as a DE&I leader, and let me do the work and be supportive of that work. So that is the second thing that I personally would look for. The third thing that I would look for is innovation. I think we have momentum in society, and we never want to waste momentum. And so the ability to innovate, to try new things, I love that, like try, fail, and try again, and improve. And so that concept of applying that to D&I think is very helpful for organizations. And if we really want to move the needle, we need to be more innovative, and we need to try more things out. And so the third thing I'd look for is a company that was accepting of and enthusiastic about innovation.
Excellent. Well, I do want to give you the chance to cover anything that maybe we haven't touched on that you would like to have people think about, and just any sort of closing remarks for the folks who, might be in the field, those who might be aspiring to join the fields, or those who are just an individual contributor at a company.
Well, you all asked lots of great questions. For individuals who, individual contributors, I would share, we are all powerful. We are all impactful in the space of creating the culture of inclusion that we want for everyone. And so please know that you are powerful, and that the investment of your time, the fact that you've even joined this session, says that you invest and you care, and you can have change from anywhere in the organization. You can impact change anywhere in the organization, and it's so appreciated, and it means a lot. And so I'm super appreciative of that, and encourage more. I'd also say for individuals is each one teach one, and each one touch one. And so not only within your professional environment, but in your home environment, we can all put out good humans, if you will, into society, whether they're the little humans in our homes, or they're the humans in our extended families, cousins, uncles, aunts, grandparents. So there's always an opportunity to help others along this journey, no matter how big and how small. So please take on that challenge and do the work, and help us do the work. For people who are D&I practitioners, I would share how deeply appreciative I think we all are of the work that they've been doing, and how hard and emotionally taxing the work is that they do every day with vigor. And so definitely, I think the question that Ramu asked was around, like, what do you do to balance? Taking those moments for yourself, recharging the work that you do is so important. And so making sure that you take care of yourself so that you can continue to do the work. I think, like teachers are underpaid. And so they do such good work, and we probably don't value them as much as we should as it relates to salary in the United States, for sure. And so the burnout is real. And it's hard work. And so taking that time for themselves, but knowing that, get that energy so you can come back and do the good work, because we have a momentum shift, and in a momentum shift, that means we can do more, and we can leave organizations in a better place than when we started. And so that legacy opportunity is there. For leaders who are in this, who are, trying to figure out how they support their organization. I reshare not only, the money and the time. Money and time is super important. Like, I love money and I love time, right? I get it. But also, like, what you do individually, how you stay current in this space, whether it's 2 minutes a week, whether it's who you follow on whatever social network that you have, and just checking in once a week on that, you'd be amazed at how much you'll learn. You have to certainly decipher what's learnable and what's not, but you'll get there. I remember, I think in business school, it was in this program that I was in high school for people of African American and Latinx in business. And they said, well, we want you for 8 weeks to read the Wall Street Journal every day. at least, and you only had to read the front page. You didn't have to read it and finish the articles, right? And how smart you were at the end of that. I'm not pubbing Wall Street Journal per se, but just reading, some news source that is not something in your daily life. How much more in tune to what's going on that you can get. And so I take that same thing as it relates to D&I. If we all can read one thing a day or 5 minutes a week, that we could all get a lot smarter about how different folks are reacting to things that are current in their environment.
Well, thank you for sharing this time with us. Thank you for this moment in time and how we can really leverage this momentum. We really appreciate your comments. We really appreciate our audience for their participation, and of course, Berkeley Global. Let me turn it over to Ramu to kind of wrap up here.
Yeah, let me add my thanks to Leslie and to Jill and the whole Berkeley Global team, and of course to our audience. It's been great having you here. This is another wonderful conversation. And I'll just mention that the next event in this series will happen on July 20th. We'll have a conversation with Ben Saba Hassan, Senior VP and Chief Global Culture, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer at Walmart Incorporated. So until then, enjoy your work week.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Ramu.
Thank you, Leslie. Wonderful chatting with you.